Martin's daughter, Deana, was getting married. 300 guests filled the ballroom. Hollywood legends, casino owners, musicians, family. Frank Sinatra sat in the front row, Sammy Davis Jr. next to him. The ceremony had been perfect. Dinner was served, and everyone knew Dean would give a speech. That's what fathers do at their daughter's wedding. But when the orchestra leader signaled Dean, when Dean stood up, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and walked to the microphone, something felt different. Dean Martin was the coolest man in America. Nothing bothers Dino, they said. He'd performed for presidents, mob bosses, and millions of fans. He never got nervous, never lost his composure. But when he grabbed that microphone, Dean stood there for 5 full seconds without saying a word. The ballroom went silent. Frank leaned forward. Sammy stopped eating. 300 people waited. And when Dean finally spoke, the first sentence out of his mouth shocked everyone in that room. "You know, I was never a good father." The king of cool, the man who never showed weakness, never broke character, was about to do something he'd never done in his entire career. And it would leave 300 people crying, including Frank Sinatra. 1971. The man behind the persona. To understand why Dean Martin's wedding speech was so shocking, you need to understand who Dean Martin was in 1971. He wasn't just a singer or an actor. He was an icon, a symbol, the embodiment of effortless cool. Dean had been famous for over 20 years. He'd conquered every medium: records, movies, television, live performances. His TV variety show was the highest-rated program on television. His albums sold millions. His movies made fortunes. And through it all, Dean maintained this carefully constructed image. Nothing bothered him. Nothing fazed him. He was always relaxed, always in control, always cool. Ring-a-ding-ding, baby. That was Dean's catchphrase. It summed up his entire persona. Life is fun. Don't take anything too seriously. Enjoy the ride. But that persona came at a cost. And nowhere was that cost more evident than in Dean's relationship with his children.
The absent father. Dean had 7 children from 2 marriages. His first marriage to Betty McDonald produced 4 kids: Stephen, Craig, Claudia, and Gail. His second marriage to Jean Beeger produced 3 more: Dean Paul, Dino, Ricci, and Gina. Deana, born in 1948, was Dean's daughter from his first marriage. She was 23 years old in 1971, getting married to a man named Terry Guerin. Growing up as Dean Martin's daughter wasn't easy, not because Dean was mean or abusive, but because he was absent, constantly. Dean's career required him to be on the road for months at a time. Las Vegas shows, concert tours, movie shoots in different states, television tapings. Deana would later write about her childhood. "I loved my father deeply, but I saw him in person maybe 3 or 4 months out of the year. The rest of the time he was a voice on the phone, a signature on a birthday card that arrived a week late, a promise to be at my school play that never materialized because he was shooting a film in Texas." But Deana never complained. She understood, or tried to understand, that her father's career was demanding, that he was providing for the family, that millions of people wanted his time and attention. Still, it hurt. Every missed birthday, every empty seat at her school performances, every time she had to explain to friends, "My dad couldn't make it, he's working." By 1971, Deana had made peace with it. She'd accepted that this was who her father was, a great entertainer, a provider, but not really present, not in the way she'd wanted him to be. June 13, 1971, the Beverly Hills Hotel. The wedding was planned for June 13, 1971, at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Deana had worked with her mother, Betty, to arrange everything. Dean had offered to pay for it all, and he did, but the actual planning was done without much input from Dean. Dean was busy with his TV show, his Vegas commitments, his life. The ceremony itself was beautiful, traditional. Deana wore a white gown, Terry wore a tuxedo. The vows were exchanged without incident. And then the reception began. The ballroom at the Beverly Hills Hotel was elegant. White tablecloths, flower arrangements, a live orchestra, and 300 guests, a mix of family, friends, and Hollywood royalty. Frank Sinatra was there, of course. He and Dean had been close friends since the Rat Pack days. Sammy Davis Jr. sat next to Frank. Joey Bishop was at a nearby table. Several other celebrities filled the room. Actors, singers, producers. Dinner was served around 7:30 p.m. Filet mignon, champagne flowing freely. Conversations and laughter filled the ballroom. It was exactly what a wedding reception should be. Joyful, celebratory, fun. At around 8:30 p.m., the orchestra leader, a man named Mario, who'd worked with Dean for years, caught Dean's eye and nodded toward the microphone. It was time for the father of the bride speech.
5 seconds of silence. Dean nodded back. He wiped his mouth with his napkin, took a sip of his drink, and walked to the microphone. The room started to quiet down. People nudged their neighbors. Dean's going to speak. Conversations trailed off. Attention shifted to the front of the room. Frank Sinatra leaned forward in his seat, smiling. He was expecting the usual Dean Martin performance. A few jokes, maybe a song. Classic Dean. Sammy was smiling too. He'd heard Dean speak at events dozens of times. Dean always killed, always made people laugh. Deana, sitting at the bride's table with her new husband Terry, watched her father approach the microphone. She was smiling, but inside she was nervous. Not because she was worried about what Dean would say, but because this moment, her father giving her away, speaking at her wedding, felt surreal. Dean was finally here, finally present for one of the biggest moments of her life. Dean reached the microphone. He adjusted it slightly, looked out at the 300 faces watching him, and then he just stood there. 5 full seconds. Not speaking, just standing. The silence was unusual. Dean Martin didn't do awkward pauses. He was smooth, rehearsed, professional. But this pause felt different, like Dean was gathering courage or deciding whether to say what he was thinking. Frank's smile faded slightly. Something was off. Sammy stopped eating and put down his fork. The entire ballroom waited. And then Dean spoke. "I was never a good father." You know, his voice was quieter than usual, not the confident, projected voice of a performer. Just a voice. I was never a good father. The ballroom froze. This wasn't the opening anyone expected. Frank's eyes widened. Sammy's mouth opened slightly. Guests exchanged confused glances. Deana felt her heart stop. "Dad, what are you doing?" But Dean kept talking. "Deana, baby, I was always on the road, always in another city, another stage, another hotel. I missed your first steps. Your mother told me about them on the phone. I missed your first day of school. I missed your 6th grade play where you were Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz." Deana's breath caught. "You were so excited about that play. You called me every day for a week. 'Daddy, are you coming? Are you going to be there?' And I said yes, I promised. But I was shooting a movie in Arizona, and I didn't come." Tears were streaming down Deana's face now. She'd forgotten about that play, or she'd buried the memory. But hearing her father say it out loud in front of everyone brought it all back. The phone calls on birthdays. I don't even know how many birthdays I missed. 8? 9? Your mother would hold the phone up to the cake while everyone sang, and I'd sing from a hotel room in Vegas or New York or wherever I was. And you'd say, "Thanks, Daddy," like it was enough, like a phone call was the same as being there. The ballroom was completely silent. You could hear people breathing, a few quiet sniffles. Frank Sinatra was staring at Dean with an expression nobody had seen before, shock mixed with recognition, because Frank had made the same choices, been absent for the same reasons. "But you," Dean said, pointing at Deana. His eyes were already glistening. "Deana, baby, you never complained, not once. Every time I called, you'd say, 'It's okay, Daddy, I understand, you're working.' Every time I missed something important, you'd smile and say, 'Maybe next time.'" Dean paused, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "You made it easy for me to keep missing things because you never made me feel guilty." Another pause. "But I should have felt guilty. I should have been there. And I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Deana was sobbing now. Terry had his arm around her, but she was shaking with emotion.
The promise to grandchildren. Dean took a breath and continued. "Today, I'm giving you to another man, to Terry, and I see the way he looks at you. I see how he can't take his eyes off you. I see that he'll be there for you in ways I wasn't, and I'm grateful for that." He paused. "But I'm jealous, because he gets to do what I should have done. He gets to be there every day, every moment." The ballroom was filled with the sound of people crying. Grown men were wiping their eyes. Women were reaching for tissues. Frank Sinatra had tears running down his face. Sammy Davis Jr. had buried his face in his hands. "But Deana," Dean said, his voice stronger now, "I want to make you a promise, right here, right now, in front of everyone." He paused. The entire room was holding its breath. "I can't change the past. I can't get back those birthdays, those school plays, those moments I missed. But your children, my grandchildren, I will be there for them. Every birthday, every school play, every soccer game, piano recital, whatever they want to do, every moment I missed with you, I'll be there for them." Dean's voice cracked. "Because you gave me something incredible, baby. You gave me a second chance. You never held grudges. You never stopped loving me. You just forgave me, even when I didn't deserve it. I love you, baby." Dean's voice broke completely. "So I'm going to do better. Starting today, I promise you, your kids will know their grandpa, not as a voice on the phone, not as a signature on a birthday card, but as someone who shows up, who's there, who doesn't miss the important moments." Dean wiped his eyes again, trying to compose himself. "I love you, baby. I'm sorry I wasn't the father you deserved, but I'm so damn proud of the woman you became, despite me, not because of me." He put the microphone down. The ballroom was silent for 3 full seconds, and then Deana stood up. She didn't walk, she ran across the ballroom to her father, and when she reached him, she threw her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. Dean held her tight, both of them crying. 300 people on their feet. The ballroom erupted in applause, but it wasn't happy applause. It was emotional, cathartic. 300 people applauding a moment of raw, honest humanity. Frank Sinatra was standing, clapping, tears streaming down his face. Sammy Davis Jr. was on his feet, openly sobbing. Joey Bishop had his hand over his heart. Dean and Deana held each other for a full minute. Neither one wanted to let go. When they finally separated, Dean kissed his daughter's forehead. "I love you, baby." "I love you too, Daddy," Deana whispered. Dean walked back to his table. The applause continued. He sat down, buried his face in his hands for a moment, then looked up at Frank.
Frank reached over and squeezed Dean's shoulder. No words, just a gesture that said, "I understand. I've been there too." The rest of the reception was emotional. People kept approaching Dean, thanking him for his honesty. Several fathers told him, "I needed to hear that." One man said, "I'm calling my daughter tomorrow. I've been putting it off." But the real impact of Dean's speech came in the years that followed, because Dean Martin kept his promise. When Deana had her first child in 1973, Dean was at the hospital. Not just visiting afterward, he was there during labor, pacing the waiting room, the first to hold his granddaughter. When his grandchildren had birthday parties, Dean was there, every single one. When they performed in school plays, Dean was in the audience, front row. He reduced his touring schedule. He turned down movie roles that would take him away for months. He restructured his Vegas commitments to ensure he could be home more often. Dean Martin, the king of cool, the man who'd built a career on not caring too much about anything, became the most devoted grandfather anyone had ever seen. His grandchildren didn't grow up with Dean Martin, the superstar. They grew up with Grandpa Dino, a man who showed up, who played with them, who was present. The transformation. Deana Martin later wrote about her father's transformation. "After my wedding, my father became a different person. Not publicly. The world still saw Dean Martin, the entertainer. But privately, with family, he became the father and grandfather he'd always wanted to be, but had been too busy to be before. He couldn't change the past, but he changed the future, and that meant everything." In 1987, Dean's son, Dean Paul, Deana's brother, died in a plane crash. It devastated Dean. He became more reclusive, did fewer performances. But even in his grief, he maintained his promise to Deana. He was there for his grandchildren. He made sure they knew they were loved. When Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995, his grandchildren were among his final visitors. They told him they loved him. They thanked him for always being there. And Dean, barely able to speak, smiled and whispered, "I promised your mom. I kept it."